Gemini, the sign of interplay, vitality, Mercury, and the mind. It is a sign of duality, but at the higher level of expression, a sign of harmony and synthesis. Gemini rules all forms of relationship, all dual aspects that must eventually come together and synthesize, unlike in Libra, which is more the specific relationship, more of that third ray quality. And the law, Gemini mediates ideas, thoughts, concepts at the level of the personality, and yet at the soul level it has to do with the mediation between the soul and the personality, and the fading out, the waning of one light and the waxing of another. So if you want to learn more about this particularly interesting sign of Christ awareness and mediating important messages for humanity, keep watching. So Gemini has a very strong relationship to humanity, as does the sign Sagittarius, because it has to do with the problem of duality and the evolution we must make towards that of harmony and synthesis between opposites. It rules periods of change. We talked about the mutable cross, Gemini being that point on the personality expression on the ordinary wheel, where the individual starts to awaken to the flickers of the other self, that is the soul self, and it's at that point where the wheel starts to reverse. So it is that point of change. And when we speak about the mutable cross, that mutable cross, those influences have much to do with this change, mutation, gaining experience, and then the recognition of one thing and the other. And then when we come to the fixed cross, it's the point of crisis. So we have change and evolution on the mutable cross, we have crisis on the fixed cross, and then the cardinal cross has to do with synthesis, where we start bringing all the things together and start being able to merge spirit and matter. But Gemini marks this point of that recognition and of change. Exoterically, Gemini it gets a bit of a bad rap sometimes with the connection to Mercury and the two brothers being a little bit two-faced in this case. This is the lower expression of duality. And whereas we talked about in Libra, it's the oscillation between opposites leading to an impartiality. With the mercurial Gemini person, it can be, oh, I have this idea over here, now I'm moving to this idea, and now I'm moving to this idea, and now I'm moving to this idea, this fluidity. And the way in which Mercury, at an exoteric expression, with its exoteric influences, has much to do with the control of the, or rather the effect upon the concrete mind. And that's why exoteric Mercury, even though it's a fourth ray planet, can come across as very third ray adaptable intelligence. It rules the concrete mind, which is connected to the brain, which is connected to matter, which is third ray, and also if you think of neural pathways in the brain, it's very spiderwebby intelligence, so it can have that quality there. But certainly the shadow archetype that's connected with Mercury, and we see this in a lot of Jungian work, for instance, of the trickster, and certainly some people have had very negative experiences with Gemini kinds of individuals. But this is where we're expressing duality and the sort of lowest expression of the Gemini there, and that's here, 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 and the changeability that comes with that. And that speaks to this fluid nature of Gemini. It is in fact the most fluid of all the signs. It's so adaptable and changeable, which can make it a difficult sign in terms of, well, it's one of the greatest gifts of Gemini for reasons we'll get into when we explore it esoterically, but it can make it difficult exoterically because it's just the sort of scattering like the wind in that way. Gemini can have a hard time concretizing and focusing. It's just so adaptable and movable, that mercurial quality. When we describe someone as having a mercurial disposition, it can often be someone who's very adaptable, very easy to learn things, and like the quicksilver, right? That's literally the actual substance, physical substance, Mercury. It can do all of this. Almost a bit like water, but it can maintain shape a little bit more. But the mercurial person eventually needs to focus and kind of land on something where they can specialize. So in this way, Gemini can be scattered and thus superficial. They can talk really well, they can make the connections here, but that quality of needing to deepen can be difficult for Gemini exoterically. And it rules physically the oxygenation of the blood. So here we have this hint at this deeper meaning of vitality, energy. Once again, the energy can be scattered and make it difficult to get things done. But the breath of life and that connection to the vitalization of the body, vitality, Gemini, Sagittarius, both very vital signs in that way, that fundamental activity there. So Mercury and the dualistic mind expresses as that recognition of the self and the not self. So exoteric Gemini is really this idea and that idea and serving me. Karma manas, again, we think about the opposite sign Gemini. We have that problem of, Sagittarius. We have the problem of the lofty goals and not really having enough focus. And it's a similar thing with Gemini, but it's a little bit more with ideas mentating and specific little activities and things like this. So, okay, that's a pretty good summary of exoteric Gemini, right? Esoterically, the planetary ruler is Venus, hinting to the movement towards harmonization and fusion. Venus is a fifth ray planet of concrete mind, so true knowing. And because she is a fifth ray planet, she is connected to the fifth kingdom in nature, which is the kingdom of the soul. Humanity is the fourth kingdom, Earth itself as a planetary being in the animal kingdom, third ray. Okay, so 3, 4, 5. Venus is the planet of, yes, concrete science and knowledge, the knowledge of the true self, alchemy, which is why exoterically, as she comes down onto the astral plane, she is often associated with sex and desire and romance and relationship, because that is one of the astral expressions of fusion, right? But really it's about this, esoterically, the true awakening to the higher self. So here we have the switching from horizontal or exoteric dualism here and there to the vertical axis of soul and personality. And this is where there is a restructuring. When we do start getting soul contact, the restructuring of the vital body happens because we start bringing energy in, and the soul starts to imbue itself and fuse itself into the etheric body, and we start to radiate a different energy. So synthesizing the lower and the higher selves has a lot to do with Gemini. And the building of the Antahkarana, and here is the esoteric function of Mercury, which is when it's not just the concrete mind, it is the relaying of messages between the soul and the physical brain, which is why Mercury rules Aries, which we haven't gotten to yet, esoterically, because Aries has a lot to do with, esoterically, the receiving of the intelligence of the will of the plan. So it's that quick insight, flashes of intuition. So the fourth ray, as it expresses through Mercury here, has a lot to do with connecting to the Buddhic plane and the development of intuition and the building of the Antahkarana. This process Gemini governs, and it is said for this reason that it's important to look at Gemini wherever it falls in the chart of the native, because it will reveal where the general orientation of that process will occur. How is it that someone is building the Antahkarana and building the relationship with the soul? So Mercury here, and Venus, the fusing. Earth, third ray, relates to Gemini in the way that the Earth is the hierarchical ruler of this sign, connecting it to Sagittarius, because Earth is the soul-centered ruler of Sagittarius as well. So what's the hint here? Is Gemini and Sagittarius thus have so much to do with the evolution of humanity and the human being, because it is about the connecting to the soul and relaying the information and synthesizing those two bodies, Gemini, and then the focusing of directed activity in accordance with the soul, Sagittarius. So much to do here with the earth, even though exoterically we would go, what, really? They're kind of lofty and superficial and they can be a bit ungrounded. Yeah, but esoterically this is why. And this connects a lot of different rays to Gemini. We have 3, 4, 5, Mercury 4, the Earth 3, Venus 5. Gemini is a second ray sign of love, wisdom, hence it being so much associated with the teacher, and Mercury is that which communicates ideas. Often we'll find new communicators and mediators in a different way from Pisces, translators, receivers of new divine ideas, bringing that forth and communicating that to people, teaching. A lot of this has to do with Gemini. It's love, wisdom, bringing two things together, second ray sign. So rays 3, 4, 5. 2 as it expresses through Gemini. The first ray as it relates to Aries in Mercury's rulership of Aries. Where is the 6th ray connected to? Mars, 6th ray, as it's connected to Aries as well, as another way in which we develop learning through conflict, and it's that association with Mercury, and then Mars, harmony through conflict and the working out of those human problems. The one ray that Gemini lacks connection to, and this is worth really thinking about, is the 7th ray. Herein lies the challenge that Gemini has with being practical upon the physical plane. It's a bit of a catch-22 here, because the absence of the 7th ray influence is exactly that which allows Gemini to be as fluid and flexible and adaptable as it is. That fluidity and adaptability is so important for it as a relational sign, and really leading the movement of right human relations, particularly with Venus there and then second ray and harmonizing. Geminis can make a point in common with just about anyone, and so if you've got a group of people working towards a common goal, you want that Gemini person there to be relaying messages and knowing what everyone's doing all the time and making sure right connection and synthesis, second ray, is happening all the time. That lack of 7th ray concretization and anchoring, as it is so connected with the physicality of things, the 7th ray ruling the physical plane, allows Gemini to do all this. But it can also mean that the Gemini can have the problem grounding and making things practical. So it's an interesting thing to think about. Of course, if we're looking at an individual, we look at all the different variants in the chart. But certainly Gemini is an important person to have in group work for this very reason. They are relaying and connecting and communicating and making sure the dots are always connected. This is a very second ray function here. So let's recap the functions of Mercury and reveal the third function. We've got concrete mind level, self and the not self, pointing at that mind servicing the self and the personality in the same way we had in Sagittarius, where it's the instinctual mind and activity serving the desires of the personality. Mind serving the personality with Gemini. Self and the not self. Soul and personality, building the Antahkarana, vertical. Messages between the soul and the personality, connecting to Aries, who receives the plan, the blueprints, the archetypes. And therefore the teacher, the messenger, communicator of the new divine ideas, and that flexibility allowing the Gemini individual to really adapt to whatever the current situation, time, culture, person, group is present in that moment. And then the final function of Mercury is dropping the mind altogether, going beyond the form, and the relating of spirit, the monadic level, and the soul there. So not too much more to be said on that, because it's a little bit beyond the scope of our conversation here. But the threefold nature then of Gemini, and we see here why Gemini rules all relationships, relationship between this idea and that idea, between the soul and the personality. It relates one planet to another. It relates Taurus and Scorpio as opposite signs. It's always the opposites and these different axes and the fusing of this. And it's therefore connection to energy and vitality, the breath, passing from one energy to another, bringing them together. And when those processes are disrupted or where there's disconnect, the problem of a lack of energy or a lack of vitality there. As a second ray sign, it has connection to the sun, and with that notion of vitality, because the sun, the physical sun, provides vitality to our planet, for instance. And as we connect to the soul, that begins to bring vitality in a different way to the human body. And the same thing as the spirit relates to the soul, relates to the personality, and so on and so forth. Our fixed star, Sirius, is said to be the kind of the older brother and the higher self of our solar system, and that's way up in Gemini there as well. And so the highest level of actualization for our solar system. So it's all the different layers up and up and up, coming all the way down, and it's taking that versatility and that relative capacity when we take it out of the horizontal plane as it expresses exoterically and moving it to the vertical plane, and then getting really abstract, let's say, with the signs of the zodiac and the planets and all of this. So potential for a mastery of synthesis here with Gemini, an adaptability that allows for the quicksilver quality of seeing what is needed in the moment. It is kind of a hidden sign of psychology in the way of this mercurial piece. Mercury is the hierarchical ruler of Scorpio, which also relates this sign to Gemini, Scorpio being the sign of discipleship. And when we conquer the scorpionic problem, which is discipleship and overcoming the lower self, that all of that which was unregenerated gets lifted up and revealed as divine. Matter is redeemed, and it has this, it allows for the soul to communicate all the way down and anchor itself into the human form. So once again, relating and bringing the soul into the body in a different way, in a new way, or in a complete way there. Remember that Mercury is also said esoterically to be one with the sun, and that's because everything that the sun represents in terms of our centrality, in terms of the soul and the spirit, is always being related to and communicated to and vitally passed down onto and through every other form, which is what Mercury does. It bridges those gaps. So Mercury and the sun are one in that way. So relates it to Scorpio, relates it to all of that wisdom and intelligence that comes with overcoming the lower self. And once again, therefore, knowing how to adapt and knowing what's needed with any group, any person, Mercury having that intuitional quality, and Venus bringing together the opposites, harmonizing those processes, harmonizing the personality, integrating the personality, merging it with the soul. All of this genius that comes with Gemini there. Part of this airy and fluid quality makes Gemini have a really hard time sitting still in quiet meditation. As William Meader says in his talk on esoteric astrology, Gemini is often the sign that needs most desperately to meditate, and yet they're the least likely ones to meditate. And that's because of this extreme sensitivity and adaptability in that concrete mind. They're extremely mental and busy and subtle. It makes it really hard to quieten the mind, like ridiculously hard for this sign. There's a lot to do with the need of the mastery of that lower concrete mind to allow the brain to be receptive enough to get those intuitional impulses. The signs of the zodiac always must integrate their opposite, but it is said esoterically that when we're on the path, there is an intermediary sign of development for each sign of the zodiac. For Gemini, that intermediary sign of development before it becomes the moving practical disciple in Sagittarius is Libra. And Libra, as we have discussed, rules meditation, contemplation, reflection, and the balancing of the opposites, working out those specific relationships between the opposites. So the need to make that pause, to still the mind and quieten the mind, that is a massive challenge for the Gemini. Until that can happen, the mind is really just running rampant with so much noise and material. So stilling the mind, mastery of the concrete mind, and allowing the brain to become receptive. It's a little tricky, but it must be done for the developing Gemini and Mercurial person in general. As Gemini can learn to quieten the mind, they quieten the not-self in the vertical sense. And here we have the way in which the two brothers are starting to do that waxing and waning thing, where we start to dim the light of the personality self and bring a stronger light in through the soul self, the way in which the brothers come into right service of each other. So the form begins to serve the personality rather than the other light being cut out and just the brothers representing that dual lower quality. For the person whose sun is in Gemini, it is said that there is this great potential for the fusing of soul and form together in the life if one is responding to the esoteric influences and is walking that path, treading the path. For the ascendant sign in Gemini, there, depending on the level of development of the individual, there may be a potentiality for a consummation between spirit, a capacity to develop that mediation with all the way up into the monadic plane level. So very interesting to sit and meditate upon this fact if you are a Gemini person. The keynotes for this sign: Exoteric, let instability do its work. Esoteric, I see my other self, and in the waning of that self, I grow and glow.